xʷməthkʷəy Musqueam. My ancestral name is Tolnaka, and my English name is Alec Guerin, and I'm from Musqueam. My relationship with art is a fickle one. I find it super important to my well-being that I creatively express myself, but it can also be a source of anxiety for me. I like to create in kind of all forms. I consider myself a storyteller first and foremost, but I also have spent a lot of time in like the digital art world, and I also really enjoy making things like woodworking and stuff like that. I'm inspired by a lot of Musqueam artists. There's been so many brilliant Musqueam artists throughout the generations. Modern day artists really inspire me. People like Susan Point and her children, and people like Chase Gray. Really beautiful work, and it's impossible not to be inspired by them. But I also love to consume like popular culture as well. Like I'm a huge fantasy nerd. The orange shirt day design that I did for this year is really significant to me and my own personal journey. I've always kind of dabbled in doing work in Musqueam's traditional style, but I've always shied away from it because I felt like I wasn't good enough or I didn't know enough, which definitely can be linked to the kind of the traumas and the fallout of residential schools. So much of being an Indigenous person in like the 21st century, from my perspective, is battling against those traumas, those pains, and that shame that stems from the attempts to disconnect us from our culture and our ways of being. And one of the ways that I really have experienced that is with our language as well as with our art. Having the opportunity to throw myself into this design was super cathartic for me, and realizing this is something that I can do. This is something that I can incorporate more into all of the art and all of the expression that I do. The design idea jumped out at me immediately, and I set to work feeling out the specifics. So I wanted to have animals representing all of planet Earth. And I followed that as far as I could, but given the time constraints, I did end up having to pare it down to what I thought were the two most important parts, which were the Musqueam and UBC relationship, so a thunderbird and a fish, and the kind of lens on North America's problems with the impacts of colonization in residential schools. I started out in Adobe Illustrator and playing with shapes and sketching out base forms of the designs, basically just like rough sketches. And then I went through each animal and really got into detail about the design aspects of what really makes a thunderbird. You know, what do you see in Musqueam designs about the salmon that are important to reflect, and really spent time on each animal specifically before laying them out. And unfortunately, I had to scrap a couple of those designs, those animals, due to the kind of the time constraint. But at the end of the day, I just used a reference of the globe to just add some negative space representing the other land masses. So the idea behind the design is representing how the impacts of colonization and Indian residential schools is not like a local issue or even a regional issue, it's a global issue. And so I wanted to represent those impacts with portraying the land masses of our world as animals, because a big piece of what residential schools tried to do was disconnect us from who we are and where we come from. And that's something that is still ongoing today. So for example, a young Indigenous person is expected to go to a public high school, and that high school has a curriculum that's interchangeable with basically any high school in the province, really. And so there isn't that connection of contextualizing who you are and where you are in the world. And so I wanted to represent the importance of that by portraying the land as animals. And when I was having to prioritize how I was making that portrayal, I wanted to pick a thunderbird to represent UBC and a fish to represent Musqueam. And then I roughly laid them out in place where the landmass of North America would be. It was important to me to create this piece to show to myself that it's something that I could do, that Musqueam art was something that I could continue to incorporate into the ways I express myself, because the kind of the shame and the inadequacies that I felt and still feel are totally false. If you look at the design, the best parts about it are the Musqueam parts of it. And so it was important for me to be able to show that to myself. And I don't know that I would have been able to have the bravery to do that if it wasn't for something important such as Orange Shirt Day. I also think that it was important for me to do this design to show others that, like, you can do art. All of the different forms of art that I do, I'm either anywhere from okay to great at. But I think that in any case, if someone sees the work that I do, my goal is for them to say, like, oh, that's cool, I could do that. And hopefully invite others to be able to express themselves like that as well. So that is kind of the goal and the core reason why I want to do the stuff that I do, and why being able to do this design was really important and near and dear to me.